So, I am doing a quick session on teaching and learning using games. But I'm going to try and present this in a slightly different way. So, can I ask everybody to just turn off their video feeds for a second? And just as dogs are popular, I thought I'd turn myself into a little petting zoo. So I'll be talking about teaching and learning with games and how we can use games in a higher education setting. And hopefully, all things being equal, I won't start at the end. So teaching and play learning with games. So one thing I will say, I'm trying something a little bit different. As you can see, I'm still here. So rather than screen sharing, I'm going to try and present directly through the Teams camera. So just to do that, I need everyone to turn off their video because it centers mine. And the other thing I would suggest you do, because you've probably got the chat open and you can't see the full thing, if you right click on the screen and press fit to frame, that should center everything I'm doing so you can see it properly. So what's the difference between playing games? So generally speaking, and I've got some of my games colleagues in the chat, and they all know how fraught this is with a bit of discussion. But generally speaking, play is to act in a manner that is fun. So to do things for recreation or enjoyment. It doesn't necessarily need to have rules or competition. It is just doing things for enjoyment in itself. Whereas a game is some sort of physical or mental contest conducted according to rules where participants are in direct opposition to each other. Now, a participant doesn't necessarily mean another person. It can actually be a computer or the world or yourself. Again, it can be an internal competition. But generally speaking, these games have rules. And we often, in gaming circles, refer to this as the magic circle. So things that happen within the magic circle, the rules of the game world apply. So if you think of this as say, a boxing match, there are rules within a boxing match that you're allowed to do within boxing that you can't apply to real world. You can't take the rules of boxing and apply it to everyday situation. So the big things out of this, play doesn't need to be a competition, doesn't need to be competitive, and a game doesn't need to be recreational. So there's lots of non-recreational games out there. We call them serious games. For example, war games, military training. It would still come under the rules of the game because it is still some sort of competitive engagement where there are rules and structures applied, but hopefully no one would find them fun. And there's loads of things we could discuss. So I'm just seeing in the chat. Yeah, if you try adjusting the aspect ratio of the screen of your thing, you should be able to get things working that they fit. I don't know Teams on Linux, unfortunately. So gamification, which is where we use the typical elements of a game, things like scoring, leadership, leaderboards, towards other areas of activity. This came out of business management and marketing. There's challenges with gamification. Gamification is often the one that we talk about in higher education. But one of the challenges here is we often sap students' intrinsic motivations. If you're getting a reward every single time you do something right, what happens when we take that reward away? And we actually know there's some quite negative consequences there. And also the problem with leaderboards is it's great when you're at the top, or actually it's really great when you're trying to get to the top. It's not so great. It can be quite demotivational when you're at the bottom. So gamification, it has its proponents. It has its people who are really, really quite passionate about gamification. It also has people who are quite cautious with it. I think gamification is a really useful tool, but wield with caution. I mean, there's levels of addiction there, and the fact it's coming out of marketing, it is a tool with a very specific purpose. Simulation, where we're using games to practice specific skills or experience specific situations. For example, we might do role play. We can create role-playing games to experience certain situations. Some things are too dangerous to do or impossible to do in the real world, so we can recreate them in a game. For example, my company creates a game called Ocean Rift, where you can go underwater and you can learn about fish. And now maybe you can do that naturally with a scuba tank. You have to go and find the fish. You have to be in the right place. With the game, you can go anywhere in the world. But the game also allows you to go back in time, so we can do prehistoric fish. We've got that. I can't remember what it's called now. The one that looks like Nessie. So you can go and learn a little bit about that and see what it might have looked like in a real environment. Don't know why I did that for Nessie. And finally, brain training. This little dude. So using games to train specific cognitive abilities. However, opinions are really split on the benefits of brain training. There's actually very little evidence that it does anything good. Not to say that stimulating and practicing and learning and all those things aren't really great. But a lot of the claims that brain training proponents are making are relatively unsubstantiated. And actually, some of the companies involved in this are quite predatory. I mean, there was a whole legal case quite recently where some companies were saying it could help reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's, which there is no evidence to support at all. So again, brain training, if you enjoy these apps, if you enjoy playing them, fine, you make the most of it, but there's very little evidence backing behind that. The things I am actually going to discuss are projects we've done at Lincoln. So using games for engagement. This is a project I did called Star in VR, which was managed and run by students. To support transition, this is a current project I've got going on at the moment where we've built a recreation of the University of Lincoln as a video games environment. And you might have seen this on Twitter. This has been relatively well covered. And pastoral, these little skeleton guys up here. So using games to engage with and support students' well-being and answer questions in a pastoral setting. And I've got some colleagues in the chat who've supported me with this project as well. So Star in VR. Something I say quite often is that lectures don't have a credits reel. Now you go to a movie and you see everybody who's helped on that movie, from the cleaners, the security guards, to the actors, to the directors, everybody's there, right? We don't have that with lectures. When you deliver a lecture, students say, right, okay, this is this one person, this is my learning community right now. This lecturer, this is the person that I'm benefiting from. Whereas we all know the reality is that there's a whole suite of people that have allowed that lecture to happen. The librarians, the AV team, the digital ed team, there's a whole suite in the learning community. We have deputy vice chancellors, we have department heads. And actually, a lot of students don't really know who these people are or what they do. Their immediate university is their department and the staff that interact with them on a day-to-day basis. Now, if they don't know who these people are, who these departments are, they don't always get the main benefit they can out of them. And we have amazing professional service teams that some students will underutilize their entire times at university. And I'd be really keen if anybody could drop into the chat if they've had similar experiences where students you'll say, why haven't you spoken to student advice? And they'll go, I've got no idea who that is or where they are. And it's frustrating at times. So what we wanted to do was find it's not that the information isn't out there. We just probably needed to find a different way to package it up. So what we did was we used a video game to create a kind of fun video series. We used a game called Project Cards, and we invited colleagues into race in our simulation as a timed lap, and we used that to pack it up a meaningful interview about what they do. So Dave Pritchard's in here. He's been subjected to my chair, so he can, I'm sure, tell you horror stories all about it. The interesting thing about this was it's the game itself, the competition between the staff members was that useful hook. It was a driver to draw in engagement. We based it off this Star in Reason Price car, which is an interview on Top Gear. And actually what we found out from this is when things go wrong, viewership and engagement is higher. So it's a really good example of this. Our very first episode with Sam Cave, who's the College Science Placements Officer, he was a terrible driver. So bad. He crashed 3 or 4 times on the track. We've now consistently proven you can get a faster lap around Brands Hatch in a go-kart than Sam can do in a Porsche 911. It was an atrocious lap. The week after we released the Star in VR episode, Sam had 80 engagements, 80 people asking to know more about placements because they'd seen his video. We'd never seen that level of engagement with our placements officer before. But beyond that, Sam would get a whole bunch of kind of water cooler moments of students bumping into him in the corridor who didn't know who he was and go, "Oh, I recognize you. You're Sam. You were on that video. You can't drive. Can I talk to you about placements?" And that led to this really nice kind of engagement that wouldn't necessarily have happened otherwise. We provided some sort of shared event, some sort of fora for students to focus on. And we've got loads of success stories about this, and I've got a paper coming out as well. So hopefully I'll be writing up more about this and sharing it with you down the line. The second project is a transitional project, Lincoln Island. So this is a games interpretation of the Lincoln Brayford campus. What we did was we took an OpenStreetMap vector plot of the University of Lincoln. We got rid of the town and bits that weren't directly related to navigating around Lincoln, and we built on it. So all the roads, all the buildings are one-to-one mapped with how they are in the real world. It's all scale. We reimagined it as a pirate island. This was two reasons. One, I already had a load of pirate island models, and so it was cheap. And I'm not a 3D modeler. I didn't want to rebuild the University of Lincoln. But there was also a conceptual thing. I wanted to make a clear conceptual break between the Lincoln Island video game and the University of Lincoln. A university is not its buildings. And we say that a lot. And I didn't want to create that close connection. What I want to say is this is essentially a virtual map. Now in Lincoln Island, you can do quests. You can go on, you can do some practice firing your virtual cannon. We've recreated the marina as a pirate port. We're just about to walk past Kirsty Miller on the right. And that was the other side of this. We asked staff and students to submit their kind of profile, a bunch of responses, their name, and select a kind of a visage. And we recreated them in Lincoln Island. So you can walk around and you can talk to real people. Well, recreations of real people. So you can get a really nice measure of the ethos. But we were in this situation at the moment where normally we would have students dropping on our doorstep asking just to have a look around. Can we see the campus? And obviously we can't do that now. We can't support that in the same way that we used to. So what I want to do is create something where people could still learn how to navigate the University of Lincoln. And where this comes into transition is, look, you don't want to be while you're trying to navigate new friendships, a new timetable, a new learning environment, a very different higher education, a very different education space. You don't necessarily need to want to know where you can buy the cheap Krispy Kremes or where you can get a coffee. You can learn that through this kind of pre-practice, this pre-simulation. And we're doing a piece of research about whether this is actually going to help students transition into the university. So that's a really interesting project. Really excited about that at the moment. This has been downloaded a whole bunch of times. We're really pleased with it. I've given some virtual tours to students who've contacted me via Twitter and say, "Can you show me around?" And I've actually gone in very much like this screen and actually shown them around Lincoln Island. Yeah, there's a fantastic swan that Graham's built, which will be going out in the next update. And also at the moment we've got the Festival Creativity, which is run by Giles from the College of Arts. We've created a version of the Festival of Creativity with the student work, and we've put it in Lincoln Island. So if you've looked on the Festival Creativity website and you want to see some additional stuff, you can download the game. It's free. It's on the Microsoft Store. Feel free to have a wander around. We are hoping to build other versions as well for Macs and so on. The final project I want to talk about that we've led is a video game stream project. This, again, we did quite a lot of work, and we've got a paper coming out about this quite soon. This is about pastoral support during while doing a video games broadcast. What we do is myself and three colleagues. So Kieran, who's in the chat, has done a few of these with me. I think he's done most of these with me. We go online and we do, as you can see over there. I do a picture-in-picture video games broadcast that students can log in and watch from home on Twitch, which is a video game streaming platform. And we do this, and they drop into the chat and they ask us questions about their course, about things that and I like that term, peripheral content, that things that are in the kind of ancillary nature, right? So, how do I develop a portfolio? I'm worried about getting a job. What do I do? How do I prepare my CV? Things that we normally deliver in a pastoral setting, but we provide a really open and casual environment to come in and ask that. We usually stream for about 3 hours, and the data shows that students watch for the vast majority of the stream. The average viewing time is about 2 hours 45 minutes, which is pretty awesome. And the other side of this is we get a massive broad engagement. So we've had when we first started, we were doing something like 30 students. We've had streams that have gone up to kind of 160 students. Which is amazing because the viewership numbers never really look that way, and then you get emails from students who've got together as a society and they've booked out a room and they've been watching it like a cinema event. The reason we do this with a game is it acts as a really cool visual hook. It holds engagement during quiet periods. So if students don't have an immediate question to ask, they're still willing to watch us do something silly in a video game. And we're all terrible at video games, and I can't stress how bad we are at this game. We do silly things. We get shot by cannons all the time, and the students laugh at us. But going back to the kind of the Star and VR stuff, I would say there's nothing more humanizing than watching a person in a position of power doing something ultimately terribly. It's funny, it's humanizing, and it makes an engagement that it's easier to engage with us on that level. It's anonymous. Students can talk to us, yet we've never had a problem with any kind of disruptive commenting. And during a session, we have, several hundred comments that come in that we respond to, and we put these on YouTube. We publish them openly. So these are the projects that we're working on at the moment. These are ways that we've engaged video games into teaching and learning beyond just the kind of standard gamification stuff that we often see. I just think comment come in. Would be interested to know how unique this engagement to computer science students. Would social science students also watch 3 hours? So this is a really interesting area because video games live streaming is actually universally the fastest growing form of entertainment media. It takes up a massive amount of internet bandwidth, of the total internet bandwidth. When I was going through university, I would go home and I would stick kind of a Friends episodes on or something as background noise while I'm working. Students are now going home and they're logging in and watching Twitch. It's kind of democratized live and reality television. So yes, we're seeing this all over the place. And actually, I'm working with some colleagues at other institutions who are following a race talk, but we're interested in doing this in other fields. The reality is we're not talking about the game. We're not teaching with the game. The game is literally just a background. We are pretending pirates for an evening, and students are engaging with us on that level. So if after all this, you want to do something cool and different with games, and you don't know where to start, I've actually created a gamified learning idea generator. So it's a random gaming idea. It's based on some quite strong research basis from things like the ideation and innovation fields. There's a lot of evidence that says random, chaotic ideas lead to innovative processes. So if you're interested in doing a game and you need some inspiration, don't know where to start, you can just log on to my website, press spin, and you may get what's coming up now, an online game as a simulator in a lecture, and see whether you can actually take those kind of terms and do something with it. So it's on the left-hand side, it gives you a type of game. In the middle one, it gives you some sort of application. So as a pastoral activity for brainstorming. And on the right, it gives you a domain or a technology. So on that note, thank you for coming along. And are there any questions? I'll go back to Dogface. If there's any questions, drop them into the chat. How do we get those dogs? So I've actually written a post about this. So if you go to, this is the point where I shamelessly plug my own blog. But I've written a post on using a piece of software called OBS, which allows you to edit your feed. So if you read that post, you'll be able to do this. You'll be able to have all my adorable critters. These are just GIFs that I've just dropped into my feed. How much time does it take to create the virtual campus? I couldn't tell you. I was semi-conscious for most of it, is the reality. I just had my son. I was sat on my computer trying to rock him to sleep, and I could have been there for an hour. I could have been there for 6. I'm not entirely sure. I was operating about 2 hours sleep at that point. I did have a lot of help. So I had an MSc student and a PhD student who worked really close with me. And some colleagues have contributed bits and bobs as well. Graham Cooper made an awesome strutting swan. His walk perfectly times to Night Fever. It's fantastic. So yeah, it wasn't a one-man band. There was absolutely a team involved, but a lot of it was late nights, rocking baby, typing on a computer.
Chris, you seem to be working really hard to humanize senior members of staff in these experiments.
Yeah.
But I guess a lot of what some people do in universities is they deliberately try to create a much more formal and authority-based environment. For example, many of the people you put in that car would usually choose to wear a suit to deliberately distance themselves from the student. So don't you worry you're breaking down a relationship that has other useful purposes by doing
that? Yes and no. So I think students are actually really quite good at recognizing the different formalities in different environments. There's how you would talk to me during attendance panel would be very different to how you talk to me on an online setting, right? And actually being able to define those differences. I mean, that's a skill that we have to do throughout our working life, right? You know, the formality that we might do in an event like this, which is purposely casual, would be different to maybe an annual review or something like that. So I think students are actually quite good at that, and I've not seen that in itself break down before. But there are also students who find that formality in itself a barrier. Not the talking to somebody in a professional manner, but the fact that I don't exactly know who you are, and I'm worried about engaging on this spec. So I think it creates a door, but it doesn't blow it open, right? You know, it's we didn't blow the bloody doors off. So another question, Charlotte, what's the evidence of using games for increasing learning quality? Depends what you mean on quality. So there's lots of evidence for, like, say, things like gamification and improved engagement, improved retention. There's quite a lot of evidence out there. There's quite a big evidence base there. There's quite a lot of evidence. I mean, the projects that we've done have shown a massive increase in engagement. So, for example, the live streams that we've done have held and maintained engagement throughout. So the reality is an engaged student is generally easier to teach. They're there, they're present, they're participating. So there's actually quite a lot of evidence out there. And simulation as well. When we're talking about simulation games, sometimes simulation games are the only way to teach because it actually presents a new environment. Phil's made a comment on there's loads of research. I'm going to pass over to Kirsty and Claire in a second. One last one from Helen. So Helen, you've got your hand up.
Oh yeah. Cheers for that, Chris. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to that point. I don't think I understood Charles's question. Is the suggestion that humanising academics or people in senior positions a bad thing? Have I misunderstood that? Is that what's been suggested?
No, I do appreciate Charles's point with that one. I think there is an element where you can potentially do that too far and create, in environments where we do need a level of formality. For example, if there is a requirement for authority, things like an attendance panel, for example, do you delegitimize that? And I know that there's discussions there in kind of management circles as well. I don't think it's a bad thing to humanize people. I don't think it's a bad thing to open that door. But like I say, I don't think you create an environment where you reduce professionalism. I think you create a space where you can be relaxed. But I think everyone's quite good at knowing, right, okay, this is where I need to turn business face on. This is where I can be relaxed and engaged on a different level.
And I think that's a really important skill that we actually teach students, that we have to wear different hats and that we're able to switch into different modes of operation very, very quickly. And that's something that's quite difficult for them to understand. So I'm all for the humanization through these kinds of processes, but at the same time, teaching students how to switch on and off those different hats for different purposes.
Phil has just pointed out the point of my reduced professionalism while I'm surrounded by kittens and puppies. So yeah, I mean, again, what I'm comfortable doing in this environment is inherently different to what I would do if I was, I don't know, if I was presenting something that was much more publicly broadcast. I wouldn't go onto a BBC interview with a little dog diff. You know,
you should.
Maybe I should. Yeah, right.